Hello and good morning. This is Kelsey from Kels Reads Things at Anna Porter Public Library in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and I am very excited to be discussing with you today on this very chilly Friday morning. City of Glass. This is the third book in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare, and this series follows Clary Fray, who is a everyday 16-year-old girl until she discovers that actually no she isn't. She is a shadow hunter and she has angel blood inside her. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss the plot a little bit for book 3. Clary will do anything to save her mother. When we last left Clary off, her mother was unfortunately still in a coma. Clary had realized that she is actually a shadow hunter. She's staying at Luke's, and slowly but surely, downworlded children are being killed throughout New York City. For those who haven't seen my previous videos, downworlders are basically any kind of supernatural being that is not a shadow hunter, of which defends the world from these beings in case they become disruptive. That's where we were at last time, and now in this book, Clary is still trying to do anything that she can to find a cure for her mother. Once she's given a tip, it means she'll even sneak in to the City of Glass, the Shadow Hunter's ancestral home, also known as Idris. So Clary does just that. She goes to Idris without really thinking about it. She creates a portal. As we learned in the previous book, Clary has magical abilities. She can create runes and portals into things and this magic is not well known about. It's thought to have been ancient and not even possible. So Clary ends up in Idris, and regardless of how it affects her brooding brother Jace. And the divide rift between Clary and Jace is really prominent in this book. There's a lot of tension between them because if you've seen my previous videos, you know that these two met in the first book, not knowing that they were siblings. They kind of fell in love, and then they found out by the end of book 1 that, they're related. And this strain between Clary and Jace is also creating a little bit of a strain just in general, between the Lightwoods and Clary as well. And not only is there a divide between them, there's also a strain, and has been a present strain, between the Clave, which are like the rulers of the Shadow Hunters. They're kind of like the government, and downworlders, and that rift is going to have to be kind of mended in order for them to stop Valentine. Yes, Valentine the villain. I guess I should mention him as well. He is gathering forces, and we found out by the end of book 2 that his mission is to gather all of the mortal instruments that were given by the angel Raziel and to use them to his advantage in order to take over Idris with an army of demons and basically destroy everyone. So that's his plan. And that's the general premise of this book. There are also new characters that are introduced. Aline, I believe her name is, and Sebastian, I believe they're cousins, and they are there visiting, I can't remember the purpose of their visit, but they are visiting with the Lightwoods in Idris. So overall, this was probably my favorite installment in the series. We finally have some answers for some questions that have been left open. And I probably won't give too much away in terms of major plot points or spoilers, but please know that some concerns have been laid to rest. There are definitely some triggers in this book that readers should be aware of, including death. I'm not really sure if I should be very specific about that, because again, if I say anything further, it'll be pretty much a devastating spoiler. So just be aware that there is death in this book. There is quite a bit of quite a lot of hatred being spit between, Clary and Jace specifically because they're in such a tense state in the relationship. And Clary is just kind of trying to find her place. Not even that, she's more concerned about her mother than anything about defeating Valentine because he is her father. So that kind of directly affects her, of course. So now I'd like to talk about some of my thoughts and some of the things that I noticed. Clary now has new abilities that she obviously never knew how to access before or even was aware that they were in her blood. And as I mentioned, she's being a little bit reckless with them, but that's kind of just Clary. She can be a little bit of a reckless person, but it comes from a place of loving her friends and family and will do anything to defend them. And to be honest, that's kind of the attitude of a shadow hunter. So I'm not really sure what everyone's issue was. Clary got pretty browbeaten about this. Not only between Jace, but between other characters. There were a lot of characters that were kind of just telling her basically her flaws and how she can't help, but she ends up being like the answer, the solution to the entire, the entire struggle with Valentine. So, I'm cool with Clary being reckless if it, equals results that don't hurt anyone other than the enemy. There are a lot of political struggles also highlighted in this book between the Clave and between Clary and Luke. Because, Luke is a werewolf, so they don't really want to listen to him because he's technically a downworlder. And he almost is considered to have been a traitor because he accidentally became a werewolf while he was a shadow hunter. And Clary and basically the whole crew are trying to convince the consul, who is the person who is kind of like in charge of the Clave. They're the ones who count the votes, they're a high-ranking officer, they interpret the laws, and they also advise the Clave and the Inquisitor, who is another, I suppose, leader of Idris. They're just trying to convince them that working together is the solution to defeating Valentine. But of course, being a political superpower, the Clave takes a little bit more convincing. I noticed that a lot of the characters showed their worst face in this book, and what I mean by that is some of their worst characteristics shown in this book. And I think that was on purpose because we were building. These relationships have been slowly building each book. Clary in the beginning of book 1 was just kind of, this curiosity, this, a person who's been raised to be a mundane, who is a person who does not have magical abilities, nor do they know about magical abilities. They are the people, the everyday people like you and me, that the Clave is protecting. They didn't really know what to do with her at first, and now she's kind of in this, but she's still not really trained. But she also has abilities of her own that no one knew about, and it's a miracle that she even knows how to control. And, they're right in the middle of a war that's about to take place, and battle does take place in this book, and people do die. So, of course, a lot of characters just are in a lot of pain. They are also just trying to cope with the fact that someone they knew and loved has passed away. As I mentioned, there are a lot of tensions running high. Jace is exceedingly blunt and just downright hateful to Clary. In fact, he's bad enough that other characters point it out to him, and his excuse, of course, is he's just trying to protect her. But when has that ever worked? It just seems like everyone was just trying to protect Clary for her own good, but Clary didn't really need any protection in this, not much of any protection in this whole book, which was kind of awesome. So go Clary. There's only one time when I question her judgment, and it's when she is in a mission of sorts with a new character. And anytime there's a new character introduced, I'm just kind of hesitant to trust them at first. So that was a little bit concerning, but again, Clary is only 16, so I try to contribute that to just being a 16-year-old who doesn't always use her logical brain. And we learned that Valentine's plans, I think I mentioned this previously, were, I actually didn't say this, his plans were to take down the wards of Alicante. And Alicante is the capital of Idris. It's where most of the people, most of the downworld shadow hunters live. And the wards have been in place for thousands of years. They protect the people from demons and any kind of magic that could get in. His plan is to basically turn off those wards, attack Alicante with a demon army. Simon is continuously my favorite character. I'm gonna go ahead and just say this now. Hopefully you've read the book, but Simon is now a vampire, but he's still just as pure and wonderful and sweet as he's been in every single book. Simon really helped bring out the best in people in this book, including himself. He was pure, and nothing can change my mind on how much I love Simon. He was kind of, as usual, the voice of reason. He was sort of an in-between between the Lightwoods and Clary, because he definitely has a positive relationship with Isabel, but obviously he also has an extremely positive relationship with Clary. So it was interesting seeing him try to kind of bring all these people together, regardless of the tensions, the pain, the grief that they are all going through together, and he helps bring them together. So excellent job, Simon. One thing that I liked about Valentine is his passions were clear, and he definitely had some good points, as most villains do, about, how things are not right. There's got to be a better way to say that. He doesn't agree with the status quo. He doesn't agree with the state of the clave. He doesn't agree with how things are handled. I don't agree with him on his opinion about downworlders, because they're basically just individuals with abilities just like shadow hunters, and typically downworlders leave humans alone most of the time, unless of course they're a vampire or perhaps a werewolf or something of that nature, but that's an entirely convoluted topic that we don't have all day for. In this book, we also learn a lot more about Jace's specific feelings about Clary. We all knew that, having read this book, we all knew that he obviously has feelings for Clary. He cares about her deeply, but we got to hear about that from other characters, seeing this attraction, this fascination, and this love of Clary grow in Jace, and that was really cool to see. I also forgot to mention that Simon ends up in Idris. They're all in Idris in this book. He ends up in Idris as well by accident. I believe Jace and the Lightwoods were being attacked, and he just happened to be there, and they all went into the portal that took them to Idris, and unfortunately Simon eventually gets arrested by the Clave for simply being a vampire that can walk outside in sunlight. And he's also illegally there because downworlders are not welcome in Idris. Okay, so overall, that is the general plot point, things that I noticed, things that I liked about this book. I would say that this one is probably the best written of the three. You can tell that the author has had a lot of practice at this point, and I don't think I really ran into any metaphors at this time that didn't make any sense, so that was a nice change of pace. The writing was fascinating and intriguing, and I finished this book a lot faster than I did the other two, so kudos, Cassandra Clare. Thank you for entertaining me. Okay, so now I'm going to touch on just a few quotes from characters that really touched me and that I just feel like it's important to go ahead and mention right now because it pertains to the video and the content inside my video. Now I'm going to talk about Simon and his quote discussing Hodge with Clary. And if you all remember, Hodge was the librarian that stayed with the Lightwood children in the Institute. Unfortunately, he was not allowed to leave. He was stuck there due to, it was like his punishment from the Clave for having ever partnered with Valentine. And if I haven't mentioned this before, I guess now is a good place to do that. Valentine originally started as like a revolutionary individual. He wanted to rewrite, basically just reconstruct the Clave and make it a better system. And a lot of people were with him on that. They wanted to see change. They wanted to see positive things happen. And Clary's mother was included. and that's why she married him. He's kind of like a Hitler character where he does great speeches and he's, an attractive man, and a lot of people just followed him because he was very convincing. He was like, I guess, any other cult leader. Compelling. He was very compelling. That's a good word. So this is Simon kind of defending Hodge and his place, because Hodge at one point, obviously in book 1, agrees to work with Valentine because Valentine basically offers him the chance to have a real life again. This is Simon's defense. People aren't born good or bad. Maybe we're born with tendencies either way, but it's the way you live your life that matters. And the people you know. Valentine was Hodge's friend. And I don't think Hodge really had anyone in his life to challenge him or make him a better person. If I had had that in my life, I don't know how I would have turned out, but I didn't. I have a family, and I have you. And that's him talking to Clary. It was so sweet. And here is Amethyst, who is, I think I'm saying that correctly, she is Luke's sister. She is confronting Valentine in this quote. You say you aren't an enemy of Nephilim, but you set each of us up against each other. Family against family, wrecking lives without compunction. You say you hate the clay, but you're the one who made them what they are now. Petty and paranoid. We used to trust one another, we Nephilim. You changed that. I will never forgive you for it. And he definitely did. He drove a wedge between Amethyst and Luke to the point where they didn't even speak anymore until this book. So that was powerful. These are Simon's thoughts on Shadowhunters and Clary specifically. He is speaking with Isabel in this scene, and he notices all of the scars and marks on her body from past battles. If Clary remains a Shadowhunter, one day she'll look like this, scarred all over. The thought didn't upset him, as once it might have done. There was something about the way Isabel wore her scars, as if she were proud of them. This is a quote from Clary. This is at one point discussing her mother, who she has a very mixed relationship with at this point. A lot of mixed feelings. As we know, her mother has raised her to be a mundane, even though she's a shadow hunter, and basically lied to Clary her entire life. Took her to Magnus to remove her memories of anything to do with Shadowhunters and magic. So, but she's also in a coma right now, having been attacked by a demon. So, Clary is kind of just has a lot of mixed feelings about her mother at this point. It's just that I've been so focused on rescuing her that I never stopped to think about how angry I was that she lied to me all these years. That she kept all this from me, kept the truth from me, and never let me know who I really was. And finally, this is just a quote from the book about Clary. I think she speaks once, maybe, and it's about her confronting the Clave and trying to convince them to gather and unify with Downworlders in order to defeat Valentine, because otherwise they didn't really stand a chance. She looked out then, through the crowd, and saw Simon with the Lightwoods, looking at her across the empty space that separated them. It was the same space, the same way Jace had looked at her at the manor. It was as the one thread that bound these two boys that she loved so much, she thought, their one commonality. They both believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. So yay, that was my general review of City of Glass. I loved all the characters in this book, Simon especially, of course, but Clary grew so much, and she showed that she could be just an incredible leader. and someone who's very inspiring, even at just the tender age of 16. And I think she, for the most part, showed quite a bit of maturity in this book, so I was very satisfied and gave it a 5-star rating. Okay, at this time, I'm not quite done with my book review video because today I'm doing something a little bit special. I'm also reviewing Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I'm doing this today because I did read about half of it. I did not finish it, however, and because of that, I just wanted to go ahead and touch on some things about this book. Get a Life, Chloe Brown is a very diverse adult romance comedy, and I say that with emphasis. It's very much an adult book. Again, it's never my job to tell my readers or my viewers or whoever what to read, regardless of age or literally anything about you, but please be aware that this is an adult book with graphic content. It's also a diverse book because it celebrates and highlights a woman who is it highlights the story of a woman who is suffering with chronic illness, as well as a man who kind of comes from the darker tracks. I'm not really sure how to say that. He has a bit of a dark past, whereas she kind of comes from privilege. And she's also plus size. So there's a lot of diversity represented in this book, which I really loved about it. And that was kind of the only thing that I loved about it, unfortunately. So Chloe is suffering with chronic illness, chronic pain, and she is a tough cookie. She's also rude, has very little patience for people who aren't really her family, and it was interesting and kind of nice to see a feisty female character who wasn't also just pure and like just perfect all the time. She was very realistic, I think, for someone who would be dealing with chronic pain and who's also kind of an introvert and has a lot of anxiety. And I loved that she was also not average or even skinny. She was plus sized because we need to have more representation of different bodies. So that was really nice to see and to experience through her as a character. Red was also hilarious. He was the comedic relief that I needed in this book. And obviously he has a rivalry with Chloe because he's kind of like her polar opposite. He is sweet and very amendable. He is always willing to offer assistance and he'll go out of his way for people that he doesn't even know. So these two personalities definitely clash. And it's because of that and it's because of the progression of their relationship that I did not finish this book. In fact, I can say with full confidence that I didn't even really like it. I want to say I either gave it 3 or 2 stars on Goodreads. I can't really remember. And the reason for that is because this book is supposed to be about two people that hate each other. But by page 50, Red is experiencing adult feelings about Chloe in a very graphic manner, and that's the best way I can say this at my works YouTube channel. If it was more of a personal channel, I would probably dive into a little more detail about that, but just know that it gets explicit by page 50. It just didn't make sense to me. I mean, obviously, when there's hatred, the line between hatred and love is very, very slim. However, just in my opinion, it was too fast. I love enemies to lovers stories, especially romances, obviously, because that's what they are. But again, for these two characters, it didn't make any sense to me. Also, the writing was extremely explicit. In fact, one specific word appeared so many times that it was jarring to the story. And I'm just going to be honest, I'm not a prude. I'm not someone who is against seeing profanity in my books. In fact, a lot of my favorite books have profanity and adult scenes in them. However, again, the way this was written, it was almost kind of like in your face to the readers, and I just thought it didn't make sense. The offensive language used did not flow with the cutesy story, because the story is very cute, and it is very modern, which I appreciate. But again, there's a difference between being modern and just being explicit and just offensive. I don't really know any other way to say that. So it was just a little too much for me. If the romance had been a little bit of a slower burn, I think I would have devoured and loved it. But again, this is just my opinion, and you can take that with a grain of salt. Again, I loved the idea of the story, but the execution was not my favorite that I've seen. Okay, so those are my book reviews today. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to subscribe, to ask me questions, and to recommend books to me in the future. I'm always willing to learn about new books. Thank you so much, and I look forward next week to finally discussing with you Invisible Differences. It's a graphic novel about a woman who is diagnosed with autism in her adulthood who did not realize previously that she has autism. So that was an incredible read. I will also be discussing with you A Heart So Fierce and Broken. I absolutely loved it, which is very nice because I wasn't as big a fan of the first book in the series, and I cannot wait to read the third. I'm also reading What's Not to Love. I can't remember the author's name right now, but please know that it has been pretty hilarious and fantastic so far. Thank you again so much, and I look forward to talking more books with you next week. Have a good one.